We all have these universal assumptions that we just sort of accept as absolute truth. We never really question them. And one of the biggest ones out there, at least in my opinion, is this idea that simply putting kids in sports automatically builds character.
Oh, absolutely. It's a huge assumption.
Right. Like, we think of youth sports as this, I don't know, this magical assembly line. You'd drop a child in at age 5, they run around a field for a bit, pick a ball, and then pop out the other end a decade later with, perfectly formed confidence, unshakable resilience, and stellar teamwork skills. We
Yeah.
treat it like a guaranteed transaction. But, and this is what we're getting into today, what if that automatic benefit is actually a complete myth?
Yeah, what if just putting a kid in a jersey doesn't actually guarantee anything at all?
Exactly. And that brings us to the core of today's deep dive. We are looking at a really fascinating transcript detailing the Mentors Project. It's this initiative that's entirely focused on how to create genuinely positive youth sporting environments. And our mission for today is to unpack a specific finding from their research that, honestly, it completely flipped my perspective.
It's a very eye-opening project, for sure.
It really is. Because they found that the actual kids on the field aren't the ones who need the most intervention. The adults in the room, the coaches, the referees, the families on the sidelines, they're the ones who are actually breaking the system. And they desperately need training to make youth sports educational again.
Yeah, the source material forces us to really look in the mirror. It points out a critical flaw in the whole architecture of youth sports. I mean, we assume the adults are providing this supportive foundation, right? But right now, the blueprints we're using are just, well, they're heavily flawed, and they're actively causing harm to the kids' development.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the mentors' research highlights something really specific that just stopped me in my tracks. They found that the educational impact of a sport isn't just neutral when things go wrong. It is actively reduced when children receive inconsistent messages from the different adults in their lives.
Right, the adults are accidentally short-circuiting the very character-building machine they're relying on.
Exactly. So how does that actually happen?
Well, to understand why that happens, you have to look at the sporting experience as an ecosystem. The Mentors Project recognized that a child's learning isn't just, an isolated event happening between the starting whistle and the final buzzer.
Hmm.
It's influenced by every single interaction in that entire environment. So when a coach emphasizes effort and teamwork during a Tuesday practice, but then a parent screams at the referee about the scoreboard from the sidelines on Saturday,
Oh, wow. Yeah.
the child's brain is receiving intensely contradictory data. And this doesn't just confuse them, it actually dismantles their ability to learn anything positive from the experience.
I was actually trying to visualize what that feels like for a kid, and I came up with an analogy. So imagine you, the listener, are sitting in a math classroom.
Okay, a math class.
Yeah. And at the front of the room, your teacher is calmly telling you to take your time, show your work and learn from your mistakes. But meanwhile, the principal is standing in the doorway screaming at you that you need to finish the test in 5 minutes or you fail.
That sounds terrifying.
Right. But it gets worse. At the exact same time, your parents are standing outside the window holding up a giant sign saying the only thing that matters is getting an A+, no matter who you have to cheat to get it.
Oh, wow. Yeah?
It would be absolute psychological chaos. I mean, you wouldn't learn a single thing about math. You'd just learn to be incredibly anxious. So why in the world do we expect kids in sports to thrive under those exact same conditions?
That classroom scenario perfectly captures it. You can't grow when you're just trying to survive the crossfire. And what's fascinating here is how this ecosystem approach mirrors complex systems in sociology. Whether it's a corporate office or a youth soccer team, when the adults are misaligned, the system expends all its energy just managing friction.
Just putting out fires.
Exactly. There's no energy left for growth. And that's why the Mentors Project shifts the paradigm entirely with what they call the integrated approach. It moves the spotlight away from trying to, quote-unquote, fix the kid and focuses entirely on aligning the adults around them.
So instead of telling the kid to just be more resilient, we need to stop creating an environment that constantly breaks them down.
Precisely. And this integrated approach is built on 4 key principles. The first is shared responsibility. Basically, no single adult can educate a child alone. Positive development only happens when all stakeholders contribute together.
So the coach can't operate in a vacuum, and the parent can't just be a passive spectator.
Right, which leads to the second principle. Consistency across environments. Children only truly internalize values when the message is the same at training, during matches, and at home.
The car ride home.
Oh, the car ride home is notorious. It's an environment where a lot of damage is done because parents often unconsciously contradict everything the coach just said, which is why the third principle is communication and cooperation.
Which means the adults actually have to talk to each other.
They do. They have to actively prevent those contradictory messages. And the final principle is holistic development. Sport shouldn't just be about athletic performance. It needs to contribute to emotional, ethical, and social growth.
Okay, so if we are throwing out the old blueprint and demanding that all the adults align, what exactly are they aligning on? Because if we want a new system, we need a new rule book.
We do. And that leads directly to the core values the project identified, which they turned into 4 specific behavioral models.
Let's dive into the first one, which is fair play. Normally, we just tell kids, don't cheat and shake hands after the game. But Mentors defines fair play as far broader than just following the rule.
Much broader. They elevate it to a comprehensive ethical framework. It includes managing emotions appropriately, recognizing mistakes, and treating others with dignity regardless of the match outcome. It's everyday integrity.
And there's a specific detail in the sources here that I found really fascinating. They highlight the unique role of referees in establishing this culture of fair play.
Oh, the referees are crucial.
Right. Because we usually just think of refs as the people who blow the whistle and hand out penalties, like necessary evils on the field. But Mentors positions them as absolutely critical role models. The way a referee communicates their tone of voice, their body language, how they de-escalate a tense moment, it directly shapes a child's understanding of what respect looks like.
Yeah, because referees are often the first objective authority figures children interact with outside of their immediate family and teachers. If a referee is dismissive or arrogant or refuses to explain a call, it implicitly teaches the child that authority is inherently disrespectful.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But if a referee is firm, yet communicative and calm, it models healthy conflict resolution. It shows kids that disagreements can actually be handled without losing your temper.
That is such a good point. And that same philosophy completely flips how we view the next big hurdle, which is the second behavioral model, healthy competition. This is where the pressure cooker really intensifies, right?
Absolutely.
Because you've got parents desperately wanting results, maybe dreaming of college scholarships. You've got coaches whose own egos are tied to their team's rankings. You've got peers comparing stats. And all of this tricks kids into believing a really dangerous lie that their actual human value equals their competitive success.
That is the exact cognitive trap the adults have to dismantle. Competition shouldn't be an engine that generates anxiety. It needs to encourage growth. So the focus has to shift from just outperforming others to continuously improving oneself. Success must be linked to effort and learning, not just the final score.
Okay, I have to play devil's advocate here for a second.
Up for it.
But wait, isn't the real world heavily focused on outperforming others? Like, when these kids grow up and apply for a job, the real world doesn't care about your effort if someone else gets the results. If we completely remove the drive to win, are we actually preparing kids for reality, or are we just sheltering them?
It's a very common concern, but Mentors doesn't remove competition. It redefines it to make the child much more effective. Think about it this way. If a child's entire motivation is extrinsic, meaning it's purely based on beating someone else to gain a parent's approval, their performance becomes incredibly fragile.
Fragile how?
Well, the moment they step onto a field and face an opponent who is demonstrably faster or stronger, their motivation collapses into anxiety. They freeze.
Oh, because their only metric for success winning is suddenly out of reach. So there's no point in trying.
Precisely. However, if you teach a child to set personal goals and to view setbacks as data rather than personal failure, you are building a deeply resilient competitor. They learn to perform sustainably under pressure. Developing personal goals and learning from setbacks actually builds better, more resilient, long-term performers.
Ah, okay. That makes perfect sense. It's about long-term survival rather than just short-term validation.
Exactly.
So we've reframed the individual mindset around rules and winning, but sport is inherently social. Taking that healthy individual mindset and throwing it into a group setting is a whole different beast. How does the Mentors project restructure group dynamics?
Well, that brings us to the third behavioral model, teamwork and cooperation.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because this model expands teamwork way beyond just the players passing the ball.
Yes, it involves the families learning to support the entire team, not just their own child, and it also involves coaches actively bringing athletes into the decision-making process.
Yeah, the practical initiatives in the sources are so cool. They mention team dialogue sessions, peer support systems, and even rotating leadership roles among the kids.
That rotating leadership is a powerful psychological tool. When a quieter child is given the captain's armband, it forces perspective taking for everyone. The star player has to learn how to follow, and the quiet kid learns their voice matters.
Which really feeds right into the fourth and final behavioral model, companionship and solidarity.
Right. This model is all about emotional safety and empathy, and it emphasizes a vital distinction between authority and authoritarianism.
I really want to pause and highlight this because for you listening right now, whether you are managing a corporate team or raising kids, understanding the difference between leading with authority versus authoritarianism is a massive aha moment.
It really is. Authoritarianism relies entirely on fear and the threat of punishment. It demands unquestioning obedience. True authority, on the other hand, is leadership established through trust, transparency, and demonstrated competence.
When people feel emotionally safe, when they trust your competence rather than fearing your temper, their performance just skyrockets. But, okay, this brings up a massive operational challenge.
Which is?
It's one thing to have these four beautiful models, fair play, healthy competition, teamwork, and companionship written down on paper. It's entirely another thing to get stubborn adults to actually change their behavior on a rainy Tuesday evening at soccer practice.
Right.
So how do we move from theory to action?
That is where the training format comes in. The Mentors Project operationalizes these values into structured learning for coaches, refs, and parents. And they do it in two sequential
Well, the
modules.
modules, walk us through them.
Module 1 is all about awareness and understanding. It's the why. Why does this value matter, and how does your behavior impact a child's brain? Once they get that, Module 2 is the how. It focuses on practical implementation using non-formal education, things like role plays and simulations.
I honestly love the toolkit they provide the adults. It's incredibly pragmatic. They give them suggested language, literal do and don't lists, and sample phrases to use in tense moments.
Yeah, and if we connect this to the bigger picture, adults often want to be supportive, but they literally lack the vocabulary in high-stress moments.
Because their brains are essentially short-circuited.
Exactly. Think about a parent watching their child get fouled hard by an opponent. In that exact moment, the parent's amygdala, the threat detection center of the brain, fires up. It's an evolutionary response. They get a massive spike in adrenaline.
And logic just goes completely out the window.
Literally. The biological flood restricts access to the prefrontal cortex, which handles logical communication. By providing and practicing sample phrases beforehand, the training removes the cognitive load during an emotional game. The adult doesn't have to invent a healthy response while their brain is screaming about a threat. They just deploy the phrase they practiced.
You're hacking their nervous system to protect the kids? That is brilliant. But workshops and vocabulary lists are great in a quiet room. How do we test this in real time without risking the kids' actual sporting experience?
Well, enter the final step of the journey, the Mentors online game.
The virtual crucible. This is an immersive simulation environment, right?
It is. It's a digital space where players log in and choose one of three roles: coach, referee, or parent. And the game throws you right into it.
The mechanics are so interesting. There are 30 total scenarios, 10 for each role, and they deal with complex stuff like conflict management, inclusion, and fairness.
And the purpose of the game isn't to find some simple, magical, correct answer. It's to develop critical thinking and value-based decision-making in the heat of the moment. You get to see the cascading consequences of your choices.
The perspective-taking aspect of this is what blows my mind. Imagine an angry sideline parent being forced to play a simulation from the perspective of a 16-year-old referee who just made a tough call.
Yeah, it completely shifts their worldview.
It's like a virtual empathy machine. It forces you to walk a mile in the other person's cleats.
That cultivated empathy is the ultimate glue of the entire approach. When the adults truly understand the pressures each of them is facing, the friction drops, and the child is finally free to simply learn and play.
So what does this all mean? When we zoom out, the core realization is that mentors prove sport isn't a magical character-building machine. It's a highly sensitive classroom that requires all the adults to be singing from the same songbook.
Exactly. And for you, the listener, whether you spend weekends at youth tournaments or not, these principles: shared responsibility, consistent messaging, and redefining competition, they aren't just for youth sports. They are a blueprint for creating any healthy organizational culture or family dynamic.
It's so true, and it really leaves you with something to mull over.
Uh,
We constantly evaluate youth sports programs by their win-loss records or how many kids go pro. But what if the ultimate metric for a great sports program isn't about the kids at all? What if it's entirely about how well the adults in the room manage their own emotional regulation when the stakes are high?
The environment shapes the child, but we shape the environment.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive.
Thank you for listening.
Take care, everyone. We'll see you next time.